All right, so let's see how this goes. See if anybody actually shows up. 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. Showing one waiting. Don't know who all that is, but we'll see. So I didn't get a lot of questions or topics for discussion, um, either from the Discord or on the YouTube community posts. So, especially considering that this stream is a week late, a week and a day late. Doesn't give me a lot to work with, but I will certainly do what I can. Most of what I received is kind of nonsensical and silly, and I don't think anybody was actually serious as far as what they wanted to hear me talk about. Hey, Cody, how's it going? Thanks for coming by. So we'll see what I can make of this. I guess I'll kind of rattle through the topics that were provided. So one of them, the serious question, was from one of my former players in the By the Sword campaign. You probably know him as Igor, but he had asked how, or any suggestions on how to run heist scenarios in RPGs. I haven't run a lot of them, but I certainly have heard a lot, and I think the main thing that makes heists work correctly is, as far as a scenario setup, is as the GM, this is one of those instances where detail is important, because the entire fun of a heist is figuring out how to use the existing parameters of the target of the heist to build the heist scenario, to create what's going on. RPG Dad and Derek, Adric, how's it going? So yeah, I mean, when you're doing a heist, you would definitely want to go ahead and make sure that you can get as much detail as you can about the target. Location, floor plans, defenses, security. And when I say security, I also mean like shift changes, patrol routes, timing. Those things will make your heist setting more detailed and give the players more to work with as far as creating their heist plan. And then, of course, half the fun of a heist in terms of like movies and stuff like that is the setup. Getting the resources that they need to run the heist, making the contacts, greasing the palms, whatever it takes, getting a hold of that King's Guard uniform that they need, or having one forged. All of that fun side questery goes into a heist. So there's a lot to unpack there. Let's see. Let's see. And then we had Killer Tomatoes as an RPG. That one came in from Mar Hockman. Never really was a fan or watched Killer Tomatoes, and I'm sure this was just a silly joke, but I don't think it would make much of an RPG. Could make for a great scenario in another RPG. And then I had 3 which evidently were submitted while intoxicated from from my miniatures side of things. Let's see. Those were from Shield of Eyes. And he asks, Necromunda when? Well, whenever you want. And second edition 40K Revival. I would say that would be a wonderful thing. Second edition 40K was some fun stuff. It was some crazy stuff. And certainly a much more entertaining version of 40K than what we get nowadays. And he also remarked that Comes Chaos is the best BX supplement. Now, I was not familiar with this, but I looked it up, and Comes Chaos is a supplement for running basically the Warhammer Fantasy world using the BX system. So it looks pretty cool, but I don't have a lot of information on that. And that covers all the topics that I was given ahead of time. So yeah, while folks are perhaps looking into other questions or topics that I'd like to talk about, I'll go into what I've been doing. Been trying to get miniatures painted. So that is something I've been working on. Well, I know Blades in the Dark does that with heists, because Blades in the Dark is pretty much all about heists and crime, and it uses a flashbacks kind of a system. Let's see. Anyways, I was talking about trying to get some miniatures painted. So in the last month, this is about all I have painted, but I'm painting them to sort of a tabletop quality. Nothing amazing. It's a bunch of Chinese Tong figures to use as Chinese immigrants for Wild West. There's a couple of buffalo hunters in there, and then some sci-fi miniatures I did on the side as a sidetrack. Also got several 28 millimeter police robots that I'm working on for Cyberpunk. But yeah, so other than that, running D&D at a table again. That's cool. But yeah, no, it's been pretty low key. I have been working on my mecha game, the Mecha War Games rules that I've been working on forever. Doing a serious push on those. Finding that ChatGPT is a really useful tool for evaluating your rules, especially if you're designing kind of in isolation like I am. It's nice to be able to have an analytical engine that can look over some stuff that you've written and evaluate it for any holes or redundancies, and can even call out any suggestions for areas of improvement. So I found that very useful in finding points where my rules, especially early on, where they're kind of in their most basic form, were really needing some extra work. So that has actually been really useful, and I've been making a lot of headway on that. On that same note, kind of an unexpected financial opportunity allowed me to set aside some money to where I can actually get the miniatures for that game contracted, at least a starter set for those. And what I'll likely do is design those, put them out on the market, and then from there use those to build a further library as money presents itself. So that'll be fun. Should be able to get about 20 or so mecha designs put into miniatures that way. And we'll go from there. But yeah, I've kind of just been tinkering around with stuff. Any questions or topics folks have thought about during my ramble here, or else this is going to be a really short stream. So, also, if anybody would like to come on, I can certainly invite you onto the screen to speak to me. But no, it's, I haven't been online a lot or in the streaming sphere a lot, mainly because it's just really, overall, the streaming community seems to have died back. I think I was sort of ahead of the curve on that because I didn't have a strong attachment to it. But yeah, to stream constantly, you have to have topics and themes that you really feel like you can discuss at length. Um, Without that, you end up waffling a lot. It's hard to keep momentum going because week to week you're just really struggling for topics. Um, After so many years of a pretty heavily incestuous streaming community with everybody feeding into each other's streams, I feel like most of the topics have pretty much been covered. Um, it's kind of hard to come up with anything new and interesting to talk about. Um, Especially if you're like me and you try to kind of keep your conversations online to a more positive light. I could get on here and rant and piss and moan about a lot of things. Um, but that's not really my style. And so um, I tend to not do that. I mean, did have some interesting interactions in various online communities with gaming groups that were kind of ridiculous. I mean, I would join a group, ask a question, and then immediately leave them based on some of the responses I got. It was kind of ridiculous. The level of toxicity out there can be pretty gnarly at times. It's kind of annoying. Hey, Bear, how's it going? Ah, Bear is on the air. That's where everybody is. So, like for example, the Alien RPG. I came to that RPG pretty late, and my purchasing power is such that I had not been able to really buy books for it. I had the rule book, but then almost immediately after I seriously got into it and considered picking it up, the second edition was announced. And so I went on to the Alien RPG community and asked the simple question of, now that the second edition is out, are the first edition supplements, not the rules, but the supplements, going to go away? Are they going to no longer be available? My assumption was yes, because that's how most things go every time there's a new edition. But I also wasn't sure if they were going to be reprinted in the new edition or if new books were taking their place. Like, for example, is the new rule book, the new core rule book, more comprehensive, and does it include stuff that originally appeared in some of the source material, some of the supplement material? So that was my question, and immediately started getting a lot of negative questions or negative answers, you say. And even if they were, a lot of them, even if they were useful or in answering my question, were just kind of loaded, and I didn't appreciate it. I mean, there's one guy's like, "Well, everybody already has all those books." So I'm like, "Well, clearly, me here asking this question indicates that not everybody has them, and I'm sure if I'm asking and I'm curious, other people are too." And lo and behold, other comments indicated that there were some people who were similarly curious. But it's just, yeah, that kind of behavior just kind of, yeah, just not all that conducive to going out into the community and interacting with folks. Just rather just kind of stay in my own lane and do my own thing. But so yeah, that was unfortunate. Do have some possibilities of being able to actually run non-D&D games soon. The new group seems amenable to eventually playing some other stuff, and has in fact requested some other stuff down the road, so that'll be good. We'll see how that goes. So that's hopeful. I may be doing some gaming on days besides my Sundays, which are all booked up now. I have Mondays pretty routinely off and available. Also, Friday nights tend to be pretty open for me because I am at home alone for those days and that night. Um, oh, yeah. How's it already Saturday night? It's my life. I work Wednesday through Saturday. It's been kind of hectic this last week. My neighbor lady um, lost her lease to her home, and um, she was already kind of an unstable individual, and an unfortunately unstable individual um, from mental health issues. It wasn't. I mean, there are some issues of substance abuse in there, but they're triggered by um, her mental issues. Um, she has been having a hard time of it. I can tell based on the fact that she has a limited amount of time to find a new place to live. We've had several nights of her out on her porch ranting to the stars. One night she was out there with an open fire, and like I couldn't sleep. There's no way I'm sleeping while the neighbor lady is ranting with an open flame and occasionally throwing fireworks. Um, and then the night before last, ended up with like 4 cop cars in front of her place, hauling her daughter away in cuffs. So that was fun. Yeah. So, woo. Um, so that's been entertaining. I actually ended that first instance where she was up ranting all night. I ended up taking the next day off from work because I got up in the morning and I was just a freaking zombie. I just couldn't function. I cannot sleep when there is um, clear and present instability around me. It's kind of I don't know if it's trauma response or what, especially when it comes to issues of domestic violence. Growing up, there was some of that in my home, and it's left some marks, I'm sure. But yeah, so while that's going on, I have a hard time sleeping. And also, I mean, I think anytime you have a neighbor that's going a little off, it would be difficult. But anyways, let's shift back to more positive things. We actually have 8 people watching, so that's amazing. Whoever you are, shout yourself out so I know who you are, who was here. But let's see. What else has been going on? We bought a car. I mentioned earlier that a financial situation arose where I was able to take some money and put it towards my game. Well, we finally reached a point where we needed a newer vehicle. So I took a loan out against my 401k, and we bought a car. And also, we had enough to where I was able to actually take some aside for a dream project of mine, which is these mecha models. And so that'll be cool. Yeah, so we get that next Thursday. I go in on the Monday after next, so in 2 weeks. I go in for the biopsy on my kidney to poke around down there, see if everything's okay. Found out that that's an awake process where like I will be awake and responsive during that. That'll be interesting. And I get to stay at the hospital for 23 hours following the procedure. So yeah, hopefully it won't be too big of a deal because I don't have any time off left for work, and so I didn't set any. I schedule it all for my days off, but this will not be the first minor surgical procedure I've had while I've been kept awake. I would say the first one I had, while I won't go into the gory details, those who know me know what it is, but it was definitely a little bit more troubling than poking around in my kidney. Yeah. You know, I don't. And it could come down to the type of anesthetic that's being used, but I know the few times I've been put under for things, like when I had my lap band surgery back in the day, and then also when I've had some oral surgery, those didn't feel like sleep. They really felt like I'd just been rebooted. Like I woke up in another room and I didn't feel like any time had passed. I didn't feel extra rested or anything like that. I just was weird. Let's see. So that's going on. The nice thing is, and this is kind of funny to say, but so when we moved to the state 3 years ago, we found that this state's licensing requirements were much, much stricter than what they were back in Washington. And so we have been driving around an unlicensed, it's been insured because in this state, you have to go through a full safety inspection to be able to get your vehicle licensed. And there are some very stupid things that will disqualify it, even though it works fine. Like our minivan is old; it works perfectly fine. It got us here from Washington to Montana to Missouri through a Montana blizzard, and we did fine. And because it's an old vehicle, it has things like phantom check engine lights and stuff like that. The testing facilities, they won't even bother if your vehicle has a check engine light. They won't even start. They won't actually do any kind of testing to find out if there's actually a problem. I mean, the minivan's like a 2006 minivan. It's ancient by today's standards. Obviously, it's gonna have a few bugs. So we have been very limited in where we can drive. Driving around the city of St. Louis was not much of a problem because the cops don't give a shit around here. In fact, the only reason it's actually come up is recently because we had a tail light go out. My wife got pulled over and the cop realized that the plate was out of date. So if we wanted to take any kind of road trips or drive out of state or even into the boonies in this state, we were very limited. So this is going to actually open up kind of a new level of freedom for my wife and myself. Car with a little bit more fuel efficiency, a car that is fully licensed. That means that we can do a little bit of road tripping and having some fun. So that'll be interesting. We're still going to hold on to the van. The hope is that we'll be able to get it up and running to where it can be licensed, and we'll just kind of keep it as the hauler because that kind of square footage in the back is kind of convenient. And so it'd be fun. But also, so there's that. Still working at trying to connect with the local gaming scene. That is difficult still. My schedule is pretty much a deal breaker on that one. Seems to be a lot less weird work schedules around here than there were back in Washington. I mean, I'm sure they exist, but almost everybody I talk to has like weekends off, and I don't. I work Saturdays, and so which means is that they don't tend to have other days off. So like I have Monday and Tuesday off and could easily do stuff on those days during the day, but not finding a lot of people who have the time off. So that's kind of a pain in the ass. I feel like it's a broken record situation on that one. I'm always complaining about that one, but it's been 3 years and I still haven't really established much of a gaming group. The only reason I have this new in-person gaming group is that some new friends of ours had been wanting to try to get into D&D, and so that just kind of developed organically. But hopefully I'll start making some friends because I mean, you make friends through friends. And so as I get my social circles expanding, perhaps I shall meet some new gamers. Let's see. I picked up did pick up a cool thing on a lark. I found a campaign planner on Amazon. It's kind of neat. It's actually more for not a campaign planner so much. It's more of a like a dungeon design workbook. It's got pages that'll have like a map page, like a gridded page, and then it has individual room short form segments to the side of it, and then in the back it has pre-laid out charts for doing random encounter tables. It's a really useful book for beginners, but I thought especially because it has like a full suite in the back of all of the common dungeon symbols. Hey, Wibs, what's up? So yeah, let's see what else has been going on. I have started to accumulate styrofoam again, not like pink packing styro, but like white. Or pink insulation styro, but I've been accumulating the white packing styro again because I think I'm going to do some old school terrain builds. And then my mother, who still likes to send me money for my birthday, is feeling particularly generous this year and sent way more than I was expecting. And so I have bought a Cricut for the household because I have been told that they are really good for cutting plastic art and cardboard and stuff for use in building terrain. In fact, there are some YouTubers who actually focus around using the Cricut to build anything from bunkers to space habitats to spaceships and stuff like that. So that'll be interesting to see. And also with the design space, I can make my own. And even if it's nothing more than just some detail pieces like doors and stuff like that, doors and windows, that could still be useful. Still haven't got the 3D printers that I inherited up and running. The problem is that they're given to me used and in need of maintenance by my brother, who has subsequently forgotten what work they needed to have done on them. So I need to figure out a way to figure out what kind of work they need. And then they're older generation printers, but they'll do for what I need. They have small build plates and they're the lower fidelity screens and older and slower machines, but they're still better than nothing. I just need to get them up and running. So that's a thing. Let's see. RPG wise, I haven't actually been. Other than playing D&D and running D&D, other than running D&D, I haven't been doing much in the way of gaming or computer gaming. Any of my free time and energy game wise has been planning for those campaigns or developing my game system. And it's kind of, I don't know if anybody watching this has ever tried to design a game system from the ground up. But it's really interesting to try to resilient, and by that I mean that it'll hold up to flexing in different directions as you need. Yeah, like a good solid core mechanic can bend to do whatever you need it to do in that game system. If you're familiar with Warhammer, for example, as clunky as that system may be, because it is so fundamentally basic and solid at its core, it's easy to flex stuff with that system. You really just need to figure out a basic rule description and what target number you're rolling for example, with that. My mecha game system is it uses all the common gaming dice from a D4 to a D12 to represent the quality of the pilot. And in the system, I'm trying to basically keep everything as heads up and on the table as possible and minimize the amount of time spent looking at the rule books or even the mecha cards themselves. And so I've kind of borrowed a concept that in my brain goes back to the old Marvel face rip. And so I don't use column shifts, but I do die shifts to reflect um, plus or minuses in the game, which is really easy to compute on the fly, and it also sticks in the memory really easy. So, for example, if you're a pilot rolling a die 8 for your quality dice, your QD, so all these terms are up for finalization. This is just the working words. Then you would have mechanics that would improve or decrease your chances, improve or diminish your chances in terms of die shifts, either up or down. So if you're a DA guy, you get a -1 die shift for something, you're going to be rolling a D6, and you're always rolling against a target number of 4+. So higher quality die has a better chance of hitting that 4+. So better pilots are more accurate, better or more capable. You only have the one quality stat. I'm not getting into BattleTech. We have like piloting and shooting. And then but yeah, so it's interesting trying to come up with a system that flexes really well, and then can be built around. For example, the various weapons in the game, weapons and systems in the game are built using a system of ranked traits, and generally speaking, the ranked traits work in certain ways. For example, in some cases, they improve, they create a number of die shifts up or down equal to their rank. In some cases, they control a number of, like the remote option, or the control option allows you to control a number of remotes equal to the rank of the control. Whereas a system that is listed with the remote trait can be controlled out to a range equal to its rank in inches or hexes. So yeah, it's been interesting to try and develop this, and I'm sure many of you are just snoring away with me talking about war games, because I feel like a good chunk of the people who come on here are very much more role players. But I am far enough along in this system that I can start to play test it. I did come to the realization today, and in fact ordered some supplies for it, that my combat mechanic. So I mentioned before, you're rolling for a target number of 4+. But I felt like that wasted a lot of the die roll for characters. Like if I'm rolling a D12 and I'm shooting for a 4+, what are all those die results beyond 4 doing for me? So I came up with a system in which for every 2 that you beat the base requirement of by, you get a +1 to the strength of your attack. This simulates the pilot having, being a better shot with their weapon, and so being able to hit better, because it's kind of an abstraction. And so I was thinking that I could, now the system works fine with normal dice, and I have a chart where you can reference it, and also that basic rule is a real quick one to tally. It's like every 2 beyond 4 equals a +1 to the strength. So it's really easy to visualize that rule. I have a chart in the rules that backs it up. But I thought about it, and as much as I dislike special dice, I thought I actually would get some blank dice and make dice that are specifically designed for this system. So all the faces that on each die that would not equal a success will be marked as a miss. The base success will be marked as a hit. And then for every 2 beyond that, I'll have them listed as a plus 1, 2, 3, 4, going on down through the faces, and keeping them mathematically correct for those die rolls. And so I don't consider that necessarily like special dice in the pejorative sense, like you would get, say, for like the Fantasy Flight Games version of Star Wars, which has a very opaque, esoteric system of special dice that don't necessarily equate to easily, I should say, and it's not exactly, but they don't equate easily to normal dice. So in this system, you could roll with regular dice and it'll work just as fine and be just as easy, but I thought it would be interesting to create some special dice to try and streamline that and see if it actually had an effect. Like, is it any better or not? So that'll be interesting to see how that works out. And it's kind of cool because you can actually order blank sets of Dragon Dice, and of course, Dragon Dice, not the game Dragon Dice, but the old term for the polyhedron dice. You can buy them. Initially, I thought I was going to have to buy these sets that were half black dice, half white dice, and included a D20, but I don't really need D20s. Because my system doesn't use the D20, it only uses the D12. And lo and behold, I found a different set that was 6 sets of dice that go from D4 to D12. So they're perfect for my needs. And I can make 4 sets of them. Or more accurately, I can make probably 3 sets of the one that I screwed up. But Marhawkman, D26s, huh? For rolling letters. Why would you need a D26 for rolling letters? That's an interesting one. But no, so yeah, I've been tinkering away at that system. Gave some thought today to like Boggle dice, but worse. Yeah, you could use electronic dice for D26 because you can basically enter in anything like that. I was actually on the 5th edition front, because that's mostly what I run. I was really looking into how to come up with a system, and I actually wrote about this on the blog too. Come up with a system, not the blog, the Discord. Do a system, or how to figure out character subclasses, archetypes in 5th edition that really helped to maintain the class niche protection. One of the things that really gets eroded in 5th edition especially is the class niche protection. The niche protection is kind of all but gone in 5th edition. I mean, it was never 100% in any edition of D&D, even original OD&D. You could argue that the cleric infringes on both the magic user and the fighter, because a cleric's a good fighter and a spellcaster. The paladin kind of infringes on the cleric. So, I mean, there's never been a 100% niche protection, but it definitely has been eroded in 5th edition through combinations of archetypes that really actively seek to provide the abilities of other classes. Well, and that's, I mean, that is just the basics of it. But if you still wanted to have a robust selection of character archetypes, it does take some curating there. I mean, the simplest, easiest way is to just stick with the core class, the core archetypes from the core player's handbook for 5th edition. because those were all written with that in mind. But there are some good ones that came out after that. And so really it just comes down to a matter of really considering just how much encroachment there is. But also at the same time, if you are, I would say you also you kind of want to cultivate that based on the party at hand. If there is no wizard in the party, then it doesn't matter if you have an archetype in the party that steps on the toes of an arcane caster, because you don't have an arcane caster. Yeah, I mean, you could drop the demi-humans from BX if you're running BX. I would say BX doesn't have as big of a problem with it, because it's, I mean, as it's written, it is very limited in its number of classes. So I don't think there's too much I don't feel like the elf, for example, steps on the toes of a wizard so much in BX. Not as much as, say, like an arcane trickster in 5e does. You know, the rogue is suddenly out there, you know, casting spells. Can get a little frustrating. And then, of course, if players still want to have the abilities of other classes and you still want to allow that, you can always allow multi-classing in your game. Well, I mean, if you're trying to go back to ODD, but that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting that's the goal. I'm just talking about, in general, trying to limit the overlap. But also multi-classing can be controlled by a method I considered is, if a player wants to multi-class into a new class, he has to declare doing so at the time he gains his last level in his core class, or his most previous level in his core class. So let's say you go from Fighter 2 to Fighter 3, and you want to eventually multi-class in Wizard. When you go to Fighter 3, you'll have to say, okay, I am now working towards Wizard. And then that will simulate your character studying, working on trying to find trainers or whatever over the course of play to get to that new class. I was even thinking that if for whatever reason the player decides to change what class he wants to multi-class into, he would not be able to. And that's what I'm talking about here as well too. So I mean, Derek, I mean, in a way, this would allow you to have the story component, because your character, you're declaring your intent and having to go through. And if you suddenly decide that you don't want to do that, well, then your only option would then be to go up a level in your core, in your core class again. And then you would have to wait till you would then start progressing towards your newly chosen multi-class class from there. It's a little cumbersome, but not too cumbersome, and it is a good way to limit people from trying to do things like dipping a toe into things and stuff, because they will have to plan that decision as opposed, and a lot of people are going to be dipping toes and stuff, but I feel like it will keep players from just deciding like, oh, we really need to do this, so I'm just going to do this now. So they'll have to commit to it, especially if they're going to the if they're in the after a few levels when the experience arc is bigger. You could also set a minimum in the core class that they would have to achieve before they could start trying to multi-class. Indicating that way you actually kind of, because as you go up in level, the distance between levels can be kind of protracted, and so you can kind of account for that time. Um, I do try to even now when I play 5e or any class, any version of D&D, for example, for that matter, when I try to multi-class, I try to have a story reason, and sometimes that means like reskinning thoughts, reskinning concepts to fit my vision of the character. For example, I had a Battlemaster fighter who I took one level in Rogue for, and it wasn't, and it was basically just to get like the backstab ability, or surprise attack, what do they call it now? And it wasn't because I expected my fighter to suddenly go around like sneaking up behind people. It was more a matter of I was thinking about using it to simulate sort of that quick and deadly attack that a trained swordsman would have. And so I didn't plan to go too far beyond first level in Rogue, because I didn't really need the other roguey stuff. I wasn't wanting to sneak and get all the skill stuff that comes with it. So yeah, I mean, definitely like to think about the story of a character class. It's very hard to justify some multi classes as well. Some multi class combinations, like why is the barbarian becoming a wizard? But for that matter, like my wife's character went from fighter to bard. No, I haven't looked at Adventure Conquer Arcane. Um, uh, Mostly, I just don't have room for more fantasy systems. I already have many versions of D&D, and I have many versions of D&D, and I still don't get to play all of those. And then I have other fantasy systems on top of D&D that I have that I've never got a chance to play. So I'm not actively looking, and I've never really looked at it. For creating character classes, I mean, if you're wanting to create new classes, uh, I do have the BX class creator book that was published out, the class builder. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Derek. Warlock is always a good one. If you're a non-brainy character who decides that they want some power, you can always make a deal with another power to get the magical power you're looking for. Yeah, the BS class builder for making the worst character classes you could possibly consider. Yeah, the BX class builder is pretty fun. I just realized my camera is weird. Just a second. Let me fix that. I don't like having my camera mirrored. How do I unmirror no. Let's not mirror my camera. That is dumb. But so I was like, why are my two screens weird and different? Anyways, yeah, the class builder is particularly useful if you're trying to create existing classes, because that's I think really where it shines, is because it was, as far as I understand, it was back engineered by analyzing the existing classes that were in BX and figuring out how they made those, what they equated to. If anybody's really curious what to like totally right, left turn. I have the mecha game that I was talking about. I have it basically. It fits into a little like 3-4 pieces of paper, three or four pages of paperwork right now, and is effectively a playable game with some holes in it. So you don't need to put a lot on paper to come up with something that you can start with. So, what else? Yeah, not a lot. Um, hey, Grumpy. Yeah, it's how to balance the water elf from the elf in OSE. No, no player character tomatoes. That's silly. I don't do silly. Um, no, I mean, I definitely want to start running some other stuff. I've been asked to run Call of Cthulhu at my table, but I need to get a hold of physical books. I have yet to acquire physical books for Call of Cthulhu, despite having played it a lot. Yes, Mark Hoffman, they did. It's funny that you should mention it though, because I was tinkering around with ideas for just random like ideas that came to me for player character races for fifth edition, and I wrote up a plant being like a plant humanoid. And that was fun. Uh, well, I mean that's true of anything. I mean, honestly, whatever setting you're making, you want your character races and classes to fit that. I would love to run a game, for example, like a dark fantasy type of a D&D sort of a setting where all characters had to be humans and all the demi-human races are represented as a very mythological, spooky sort of thing like they are in folklore. Um, and they're things to be feared and wondered about. And the player characters are just playing humans. And we just they everything else exists as something to be scared of. All right, everybody drink. Mar Hoffman mentioned Thundar again. No, I love Thundar Mar Hoffman, and I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just it's you have a way. Um, no, humanoid plants are a staple in old pulpy science fiction. They are quite the staple, and so it's not surprising that they have them in Thundar. Uh, but yeah, and see, Grumpy, that's what I'm going for. I mean, I want it to be like elves and gnomes and dwarves and stuff like that are monsters. They should be every bit of as big a deal to run into as like a manticore or a unicorn. Um, I do have this weird hankering for trying to create an entire RPG based around the kind of like David the Gnome type gnome, where scenarios are focused more around problem solving through non-combat means, because you really have no combat capability because you're just like a 6-inch tall gnome, and so you can't do anything. Nothing substantial, at least. I mean, you might be able to fight off a mouse. I think that would be an interesting game. But let's see. Want to run Alien. I think the Alien universe is very interesting, and I'm not going to spoilers it or anything, but if anybody's watched Alien Earth, it definitely provides a lot of good fuel for thought for running Alien RPGs, because it goes beyond the Xenomorph. I mean, stuff beyond the Xenomorph has been done before, but this is really the first time on the big screen we've seen it. Or not big screen, but on the screen in full, cinematic release. But so Alien RPG would be good. Definitely want to run that. That would be fun. I just need to find players and time when I can have those players get together. My gaming openings are really weird right now and very hard to find players for. Yeah, Mar Hogman, that's kind of because Thundar and Gamma World both draw from the same core fiction. Um, there's an entire Appendix N that Gamma World was drawn from, and those concepts of little populations of specific species of mutated humanoids is very much a staple in there. Yeah, I mean, I know that I've even read some stuff talking about how, like, for example, the various folklores around um, dwarves, for example, may come from um, the traditions of uh, shamanic cultures, often drawing new recruits from individuals who had physical and mental handicaps, and they would draw them out of the populace where they would usually be ignored or disdained, and they would then teach them the wise ways, and so you end up with these fringe populations of abnormal humans that then get mythologized by these ancient cultures. And why are they so skilled at doing things? Because, well, that's how you survive when you aren't the best hunter or anything like that. You learn a skill, you learn a trade, and so yes, they're doing the magic and they're taking the time to tinker with the metallurgy and all of that. So I thought that was an interesting take on how you could have, in like a almost historical context, you could still have dwarves in the mountains and stuff like that. And they kind of, if I recall, what movie was it? Was it Fifth Element? Or not Fifth Element, excuse me, the 13th Warrior, where they show like some dwarves in the hills or something like that. There's a movie, I can't remember which movie it is, there where basically they go see the dwarves in the mountains, and they're actually just regular human dwarves who are working under some some lord or master, and kind of they're all his minions, but they're the skilled labor. But it's kind of more historical setting. I can't remember what movie that was, but if you ever actually want to read about cool ways to, no, it wasn't a book. It was a movie. It was visual. Um, well, the thing about it, though, Grumpy, is it's a myth that Damascus steel was ever the method for making it was ever lost. They know how to make it. You can make it any day of the week. You just need the tools for it. Um, and the problem is that the Damascus steel was being made in other parts of the world. It just wasn't called Damascus steel, and it's really just steel with pattern welding in it. Um, yeah, so it's a or pattern forging. Can't remember the term, but yeah, it's not as special as everybody makes it out to be. Um, and yeah, it never really got lost. It was just not as prevalent because it stopped being special when everybody's metal got up to those standards, but they found ways to make steel that was as good but didn't have that distinct appearance. So it seemed like it disappeared because everybody started making other steel that was just as good but with different processes. So yeah, it's called pattern welding. That Marhawk, and that's what that process is. Um, well, the funny thing about katanas is that katanas aren't any more. Katanas are also a mythologized blade. They're not any more special than other European blades. In fact, they're substandard in ways. I was really surprised to find out the reason that the katana is curved is because of uh, an issue Japanese sword makers had with the steel. They couldn't get it to they had a hard time making straight blades, and so with the steel that they were using, because the cooling process tends to make it curve back on itself, so they just worked that into their final blade. Yeah. Well, I mean, you also can look at like the early, like the Vikings with their blades that were ahead of the curve too, like with the was it the Ulfgar blade or whatever it is? Can't remember the name of it, but that style of sword where they're using the bog iron, which was naturally carbonized, and so they ended up with high carbon steel before everybody else was making high carbon steel in abundance. Yeah, the cooling on the steel basically in the Japanese blades curves it backwards, and so because they couldn't overcome that, they just developed a fighting style that used the curve in the blade that they could have. Because if you look at earlier Japanese blades that are not steel or not that same steel, they are straighter, and their pre-steel blades are straighter. I've actually held copper age Japanese weapons. So the Japanese iron has a lot in common with the iron that the Vikings were using early on, in that it's a lower grade iron that they have to work really hard to get it to turn into something usable. And that process they use creates the carbon steel. Yeah, I was going to say there. If you really want to read some cool stuff on how to interpret mythology in a historical setting, the GURPS, um, the various GURPS mythology supplements that came out would have sections in them on how to run mythological elements in a historical campaign. Be right back. I think my dog needs out. She'll return shortly. Don't disappear on me. Keep the conversation going in the comments. Dean, do you need out? All right. Dean is outside. Adamantium or mithril, they're different things. But, oh. Anyhow, we've hit that hour point, anyways, I just realized. And while the conversation is starting to come up with some stuff to talk about, let's see. I should probably consider heading to bed at some point because I am an old man and I need my sleep. That and I have stuff going on tomorrow. And by stuff, I mean I got to run a game, so I have to be awake tomorrow. But it's going to be kind of a non-stop week. So Monday, I've got people coming over for Labor Day. And then Tuesday, we're doing a joint birthday celebration between ourselves and our regular Tuesday dinner guests, who also have a September birthday in their midst. My birthday is coming up next week. I will be 54. Woo. Yeah, kind of getting there myself. I find that I have a tendency to wake up in the middle of the night and have to have a real hard time getting back to sleep. I've started listening to a pretty monotonous, we'll call it a podcast, but it's a YouTube channel. Keep listening to it, and because it's something I can easily go to sleep to. Yeah, it's Bigfoot stuff, so I find it amusing. Not a believer in Bigfoot, but I find the lore interesting. So yeah. So a full pack of cards complete with 2 jokers, huh? I guess if you want to. Yep. You're talking about my age, yes. Yeah. Actually, it's funny. Somebody had mentioned in a comment talking about Bigfoot. My general stance on Bigfoot is that I don't believe it exists. I feel that by the very nature of what data we have, it disproves it. But and part of the problem is that Bigfoot is just too many different things. And and there's usually a lot of really solid explanations that could easily refute most evidence. In addition, I find it really next to impossible that we don't have a reliable video of a Bigfoot yet. I'll be right back. I gotta bring my dog back inside. He's barking at the universe. Probably Bigfoot. Although in Missouri, we don't have Bigfoot. We have Momo, the Missouri Monster. Same damn thing, slightly different, but of similar ilk. I'll be right back. So, Mar Hockman, the best evidence of Bigfoot living everywhere, being real, is that he lives almost everywhere. Yeah, that's the problem. It lives almost everywhere, and nobody can find it. And Bigfoot stories have him showing up everywhere, not just in the wilderness, but like wandering through small town America. And still, nobody's caught it on a camera, on a cell phone, on a security camera. And I think some of the most damning arguments on the video front is I've heard people say, well, in the moment, it's hard. People panic. I'm like, no. I've literally watched the video of people having a bear come out of the woods at them, angry, and still managing to get clear as shit footage on their cell phone. So don't tell me that Bigfoot wandering out of the woods is going to surprise you so much that you can't take a shot. Not to mention, static cameras don't care about that. The other big damning piece of evidence is that if you take the two maps of brown bear habitat and black bear habitat and overlay the two of them, they match almost identical the map of Bigfoot sightings. Yeah, we've caught micrometeor impacts on the site, and the argument of, well, the gorilla was hidden in Africa for years, only to white people. The Africans knew where the gorillas were. And the thing about it is, as soon as we started looking for them, we found them real quick with ancient, by today's standards, techniques and tools. So yeah, Bigfoot is not real. So yeah, and there's almost always a reason for not having that. But and what's really damning too is like some of the more protracted cases, like where people have had like cohabitation with Bigfoot. There's always a reason for them not to have a picture. There's one instance from Washington State, I think it was, where a guy had a Bigfoot that was so connected to him, it would like come and visit his farm. It would come into his house. He would sit with it and talk with it. It didn't talk back, but he would vocalize with it, and it would like protect him against people. And he didn't take a picture of it because the camera seemed to upset the Bigfoot. Yeah, except for you could still snap a picture of the damn Bigfoot without him knowing. But anyways, yeah. Yeah, it's just silly. As far as your question about Palladium games, And which ones have I played? I would say up to the 90s, I had played all of them. Um, I'd even played because I had it. I even had a copy of the original Mechanoids books. I played Advanced Recon. Um, played the Palladium RPG, Robotech, Rifts when it came out, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness, and its various derivatives. Heroes Unlimited, and these are all the ones I've played. Beyond the Supernatural, I played that one. It's when they started coming up with a lot of their niche games that I stopped kind of playing. And then when Rifts got too big and started encompassing everything, I stopped playing. I kind of didn't play much after that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like the other problem I have with Bigfoot is that, for example, in one night listening to these Bigfoot tales, we have Bigfoot that creatures that are adults in the 6 foot tall range, upwards of one description describing the Bigfoot as 14 feet tall and 5 feet across. That's a massive range. And yes, there are some stories that very much point out that there's, clearly there's a juvenile and a female and a male in this group, and that's fine. Within that story, that makes sense because they're usually providing it context. But Bigfoot also has sometimes 3 toes, 4 toes, or 5 toes with the fifth toe being out the back. He has big glowing red eyes. He has glowing yellow eyes. He has glowing green eyes. Um, and the thing is, and there's the tired arguments. Well, maybe there's more than one kind of Bigfoot. We have more than one kind of monkey too. Yes, we do, but they all still have similar features, and they all tend to be within a size range, and they tend to have tend to have much more natural um, features. So and of course then there's the weirdness, like Bigfoot is transdimensional, Bigfoot is extraterrestrial, Bigfoot is time travelers, Bigfoot are actually an advanced race that live under the mountains. There's all that other weird, paranormal, esoteric Bigfoot crap. So Bigfoot is just what Bigfoot is. What Bigfoot actually is stories told by Native Americans in the same way that stories were told by Europeans and by people in Asia about things that were derived from the fantasies they had about their environment, which overlapped with the realities of their environment. Bigfoot is the old man of the woods. He is the hairy man. He is a giant. He's an ogre. The problem also too is that these native stories were taken by early American settlers and bastardized, lumped together, and misrepresented as something else. You know, a native might tell a story of a very distinct, specific ogre in one of their myths, and a Westerner, especially after the advent of Bigfoot, which hasn't always been a thing. We used to talk about gorillas in the woods and stuff like around here, but the concept of Sasquatch and Bigfoot, after that comes around and becomes popularized, then every wannabe scientist says, "Oh, well, clearly they're talking about Bigfoot," which is disingenuous and honestly insulting to the natives and their beliefs, anyways, because you're telling them what they think about their belief system, and that's just wrong. Yeah, some people think Bigfoot is a fey being. Again, the other problem is that Bigfoot has become a canvas upon which people will paint whatever belief system is their favorite. Um, yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment, but I would say much more in the context that Bigfoot, as we understand it, and trolls, as we understand it, are both consolidations, bastardizations, and oversimplifying of more robust, complicated, and localized folklores that were often much more specific. I mean, to a great extent, for example, troll in Scandinavian parlance is kind of just like saying fairy, as on like the fairy folk. Troll is a broad umbrella, and by modern Christianized standards, there's always a deeper, old world folklore there. Um, yeah, and so like for example, in the Pacific Northwest where I'm from, um, you have skookum. Skookum means big and powerful. It's in the Chinook jargon, but it also gets associated with Bigfoot culturally. Now, it's not a name for Bigfoot. It just is, it's an affectation applied to Bigfoot. You have places up there that are named after Skookum. You have the Skookumchuck River. You have the Skookum Valley. You have, and then like in like Alaska and Canada and stuff like that, you have things like the Otter Man. I can't remember what his name is. Kushtaka. The Kushtaka is the Otter Man. And Bigfoot scientists will try to tell you that the Kushtaka, a shape-changing, who can also inflict a shape-changing and inflicting upon others shape-changing mythical creature, is also Bigfoot. That he's clearly the natives seeing Bigfoot and mythologizing him. But to the natives, the Kushtaka is very different than like a Sasquatch or whatever they actually call it around there, because the name varies. Sasquatch is actually derived from Sasket, which is a Canadian, like Dene name for, I can't remember where it comes from. But yeah, Sasquatch comes from Sasket, which is a native name from the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, so I mean, and every giant troll and ogre, big air quotes because those are European classifications of native mythology, gets lumped under Bigfoot. Yeah, if you're talking about the Sidic Ka, Saskatchewan, Sasquatch. No, but the Sidic Ka is actually a name for a specific tribe, and that's the other thing, is that a lot of times the natives are talking about actual tribes of people, other natives, or other, not even necessarily other populations that they may have encountered, and because they're described as hairy and red haired, they're automatically Bigfoot because they're giants. But giant could mean that they were just a 6 foot red haired European stock kind of a population, or Siberian or something like that. Let's see. Some people think the evil think. What are you talking about? The evil think was a later folklore added to parents' one. I'm not sure what you mean by evil think. Oh, that they were evil humans, allegedly. Well, keep in mind, evil is also contextual. So if you have two populations living near one another, and one of them has a bizarre behavior that doesn't line up with your belief systems, you may label them as evil. Um, and if you're talking about like how the Sita Ka were supposedly rounded up into a cave and then killed and then burned, I think that's what you're referring to. Yeah, I mean, it's also very possible that they may have been marked as evil because nobody wants to tell their children that they committed a genocide for territory. That would be bad. Uh, um, well, I mean, the Wendigo. It also depends on which tribe you talk to, because I mean, more than likely, the Wendigo is honestly just early psychology. A lot of shamanistic belief systems were just ways to help people deal with shit because it's a lot easier to get over having to eat your cousin because you were starving or survival came up if the shaman can look at you and go, hey, it wasn't you, it was the Wendigo. You were possessed, my friend. The Wendigo spirit was in you. You're good. The Wendigo is bad. It's not you. You're good. So, a lot of that comes from that as well. You know, uh, the yeah. So Bigfoot. Here's the problem too. Bigfoot is now such a muddy mess that even if you could convince somebody to do legitimate science on it, it wouldn't matter. It's I'll skirt political here for a moment. There's a certain set of files that everybody wants revealed now. The problem is they've been so obfuscated at this point that whatever was released would be would be completely suspect as far as its authenticity and its veracity. So, this is the problem with Bigfoot also. What is real? Even if somebody did come up with clear footage of a Bigfoot, it'd still be hard to believe it. With today's standards for costuming and special effects and the ability for grassroots individuals to create those, it's going to be a hard sell. Yes, I mean the X-Files, Grumpy. Absolutely the X-Files. Um, no, I avoid him. Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's if I ever had time travel capabilities, there are a couple things I would do. I wouldn't go back and kill Hitler. Uh, but Van Denneker, I would probably get rid of that bastard. Just him and his ancient aliens bullshit is the bane of my existence. But David Icke would also probably be there too. And whatever, David Paulides. God, there's you talk about the missing 411 guy. What a crock of shit. Yeah. So, anyways, but no, I tend to not believe in most cryptids. In fact, I can honestly say I tend to not believe in any of the cryptids. The only one, actually, the most likely cryptid that's out there is likely the orang pendek, and that's probably because it's likely a subspecies of orangutan that has yet been not been identified as a specific species of orangutan. Much like for the longest time, we thought there were only X number of gorilla types, and now we know that there are many more types of gorillas. Well, beyond that, Mr. Hawkman, there's actually a couple of good online debunks on stuff. Like all of his rationale for his special missing situations is all based on really faulty bad data that refutes itself. And at the core of it, he is a man who runs a Bigfoot foundation, who writes books that subtly but not specifically allude, excuse me, to Bigfoot being responsible for these disappearances, but never has the balls to commit to just coming out and saying he thinks it's Bigfoot. Yeah, he's a special one. But yeah, I mean, Loch Ness Monster, its waves and possibly migratory seals. If you ever see a group of seals moving in line, they often can look like humping backs of a serpent. Things like Mothman. The other problem is that is the human mind and perception. For example, I have learned recently of a thing that I have. And it explains so much, especially in the realm of paranormal. All right, so a lot of people are familiar with things like sleep paralysis and sleep paralysis demons, which are hallucinations of the brain combined with physical paralysis. Mr. Mushroom. Yes, Jim. Bigfoot is real. Bring him to me. I have a thing called EHS, and I didn't even know that this was a real thing. I knew what I was experiencing, but I have a thing called EHS, which stands for exploding head syndrome. Dumb name for a condition, but EHS is where it's a auditory hallucination that you experience while near sleep or while sleeping, that is caused by a breakdown in your brain's natural sleep and awake mechanisms. Basically, neurons fire out of whack. Can be caused by microseizures in your brain that don't necessarily cause any harm. It also seems to be associated with the temporal lobe, and it manifests as loud banging, tapping, or other sharp noises that you hear randomly. And I have, for a good chunk of my life, heard tapping on windows, crashing in my house, footsteps, things like that. And not in any one particular place, just anywhere I've lived. And I've always written it off as the kids, a pet, or something that I had just, not hallucinated, but like, oh, maybe I was remembering a piece of a dream. I was surprised to find out that there is a thing called EHS, which is a very real thing. And it explains so much. But if you consider that, and sleep paralysis demons, and just all the other things that are naturally explained in terms of perception and experience, it really narrows the field on the paranormal by a wide margin. Like you shrink true paranormal down to nothingness. But yeah, and so, for example, when we're startled and scared, things become bigger. They become more enhanced. So things like Mothman or the one big eye, like a lot of the big-eyed monsters that people run into could be owls. They could be misinterpretations of the moon or lights filtering through the forest. And people are like, well, I know there's nothing back there, but do you really? Yeah.
it's just the the chances that the world is full of that many specifically weird things is so impossible to me. As much as I love the folklore about it, I can't take any of it seriously. Now, when I go out into the woods, do I freak out about things? Yes. Well, see, the thing is, Jim, it's not about whether they fit into neat little boxes for me. It's the fact that enough things do fit into neat little boxes that leaves much, for me, it's much more believable that the things that don't fit only don't fit because we don't understand those boxes. Like there are boxes for those, but we haven't put them together and they're not ghost shaped. You know, so yeah. Let's see. The giant store. That's fun. And I think I don't think it's, for me, it's fun. It's good fun. At the same time, I have a fertile enough imagination where I still scare myself. Like I still get scared in the woods. Um, and and it's because my brain concocts scenarios. Having a fertile imagination, and the ability to visualize sucks sometimes because I can definitely create scenarios in my brain that uh, and also having anxiety doesn't help. Speaking of EHS, going back to the EHS, it's also triggered by high levels of anxiety and stuff. That's another thing that seems to affect it. So if you're somebody who has chronic anxiety like myself, I'm always in that state. So yeah, so it actually, learning that has actually helped me to a great degree because I don't worry so much about um, not belittling you. I didn't think you were belittling me. I hope I wasn't sounding like I was belittling anybody else. Um, let's see. Imagination does have a survival value. I mean, first of all, I mean, imagination is where like inventiveness and survival and stuff comes from. The ability to uh, conceive of a situation without necessarily having been through it is clearly a survival skill. Um, the fear that you can put yourself through those experiences um, is also helpful, especially in a more primitive setting where you know big dark spooky hole in the ground. You don't have to have run into bears in there before to understand that for your brain to like come up with creepy, spooky stuff that could be in that cave, which is likely going to keep you out of the cave, which is going to increase your chances of not running into a cave bear or a saber tooth or something. So all good. But yeah, I I'm a weird kind of a skeptic. I would love for these things to be real. Um, I would love to run into them. I mean, Jim can even attest. Back when we were in high school, I often said that um, I would love to run into a werewolf at least once in my life. It might be the last thing I ran into, but I could die happy knowing that werewolves are real. Because it would be nice to have that be a thing. And I mean, Jim and I have had some creepy experiences out in the boonies. Um, But looking back on them through the filter of time, I'm pretty damn sure that I know we heard something. It was a real something, but was it a, like a special something, or just a something that we hadn't heard in that way before? Because that's the other thing. The other problem with so much of paranormal stuff being based on perception and so rarely on anything measurable, um, like like irrefutably measurable, is the fact that a noise that sounds particularly bizarre could just be any old noise that you just happen to catch wrong, filtering through the terrain, the buildings, that you just happen to hear in a way that you know that just hit differently. There was a sound in my basement the other day while I was working, and I realized that it was the strangest noise because while I don't have poor hearing, every time I would turn my head to the right, that I could hear the sound. And then when I would turn my head away, I would not hear the sound. Now, that is likely not because not because I stopped hearing the sound or the sound stopped. It's because while it sounded like it was coming from one direction, it was probably a matter of the acoustics of my basement projecting it to my ear in a way. And so any space you go into is that way. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, I mean, Wibbs, I mean, that's how that's gonna go. That's the other thing too, is like how much of how much, what is the quote from A Christmas Carol where he's talking about, like, you're probably some undigested piece of beef or a smidgen of mustard or whatever. How much of our perceptions that when we run into weird stuff is our body just rebelling against us? Um, you know, we're hearing things, seeing things, we're perceiving things because our body is not working properly. Yeah, and that's the thing, Derek. I mean, that's my real damning point on Bigfoot. Because even the old arguments of like spontaneity of photography and stuff like that, like, oh, it's hard to get a good shot. There's no excuse. We have drones flying everywhere. We've got people who have movie quality cameras in their pocket. There are movies being shot on iPhones. It's, like, literally, we have just this amazing stuff. And the fact that nobody has caught a reliable picture of Bigfoot. None of the tracks are fun. And if they exist, they're always so hard to find. That's the other thing too, is like anything that amazing couldn't be that hard to find. It's yeah. Well, I mean, the internet ruined it, but the other thing too is, like, even before the internet, I mean, a lot of it just became less special the more we started to learn about it. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is with what you're pointing out there, Grumpy, is like with visions of involving fasting and other things, and all of that is things we can accidentally do to ourselves, or that can happen to us unbeknownst to us. Especially in this modern world where we live in a very, in honestly, very unclean environments in a lot of respects. Not like clean as in not cleaned up, but think about how chemically toxic some of our living conditions are compared to the past. You know, I think I've mentioned it before, but Ohio, the Ohio River Valley, has the state of Ohio is considered like one of the or the weirdest state in the United States as for in terms of like overall paranormalness. And that sounds really spectacular. And then I started to like hear things about how it's also one of the most heavily industrialized and most polluted states in the Union, and how it was also a site of massive amounts of like workplace abuse, and the like. And you know the all of that carries with it a toll on the human body, beyond just the indirect or direct, but I would say, I guess, non-consensual damage to your body and your mind. Overworked individuals also tend to compensate through chemical enhancement on a higher basis. So, yeah. See, the thing about it. So, Jim, okay, I've not seen the images you've seen necessarily. I don't know which images you've seen. My problem with the images is first of all, from image to image, Bigfoot varies very widely in what he actually looks like. So even the clear images can't agree on what Bigfoot looks like. And that's not how species work. A grizzly bear, which is a pretty wide-ranging creature in North America, looks the same no matter where in North America you run into it. A puma, regardless of whether you run into it in Central and South America, all the way up through North America, looks the same. It's identifiable, visibly similar everywhere you see it. Chupacabra, the originally Puerto Rican monster that somehow jumped across the entire United States and became a Mexican monster, and also transformed from a spiky-backed, sometimes winged, maybe googly-eyed vampire goblin creature to a mangy dog. That's the story of the Chupacabra. Yeah, it's so that goes back to what I was saying earlier about some of my problems with Bigfoot is that Bigfoot is too many things across the stories. He's a nice Bigfoot. He's a guardian of the forest. He's also apparently fucking bulletproof. Because some of the stories that I hear, some of the accounts I hear actually talk about shooting a Bigfoot and having the Bigfoot like run away with no sign of blood or anything like that. I understand that guns aren't necessarily going to kill big animals right away. Like trying to kill a grizzly bear with a gun is going to be tricky, but he's still going to leave a trace of getting shot. That is one belief, is that Bigfoot is an alien. In fact, they try to correlate Bigfoot with orbs and flying saucer sightings. Sometimes they just walk out of doors in the sides of mountains. Um, but yeah, so yeah, the chupacabra is one that's I find ridiculous. So the chupacabra is a very localized belief that gets co-opted and transported to another area and then becomes something completely different. Um, the Mexican version of the chupacabra that is popularized now is clearly a mangy dog, or possibly not even a mangy dog, but just one of those, I can't, the Xoloitzin or whatever, the Aztec dogs, that are gray and naked. Uh, um, Harpist scare energy. um, but it's yeah, the chupacabra is funny. Besides, I am the chupacabra. I am the chupacabra, and those who know me know what I'm talking about. I'll tell this story. I am the chupacabra. Um, I don't know if he's the big cousin of the Chihuahua, because the Chihuahua has got a really weird pedigree to the point where, for the longest time, they thought the Chihuahua may actually be from a different canine ancestor than the rest of the dogs, but it's not. Um, no, the story about me being the chupacabra, I don't know if I've told it on the stream before, but when I was a baby, my father, who I had no association with anymore, was let's put it this way, he was a creative and adaptive, but wholly ill-suited parent. And so one time, while my mother was away, when I was still in the nursing / bottle phase, I was cranky and needed to be fed. And my dad could not figure out how to make that happen for me. So he took me out to the barn and did what they did in the old country, Germany, where he's from, evidently, and had me latch onto the goat. So I am literally a chupacabra. I have been a goat sucker. So yes, I am the chupacabra, and I can say that without triggering a lie detector because it's true. I am a chupacabra. Um, but yeah, it's But so the chupacabra is one of those ones that completely blows itself out of the water because it becomes something else. There are some that I find that have possibility of being real, in that they're actually something real that gets misinterpreted. The Lusca from the that shows up in the cenotes. That's kind of an interesting one, because that's supposedly the sharktopus that snags people in the cenotes. But it's more than likely something else, less amazing as a sharktopus. It's likely either some form of cave-dwelling cephalopod, and it actually has tentacles, or a misidentified creature that has like a long, slappy tail that is attacking people in the water. So it could be some sort of water monitor. Could be like an unidentified breed of crocodile that maybe lives in the caves that are attached to the cenotes. It could be an otter, similar to the South American otters, which are like 6 foot long and pimp slap jaguars. So yeah, I mean the Lusca is probably something much more mundane. What are some deep ocean myths that people still write about? The stupid megalodon. It's dead. It's gone. Stop it. Stop it with the Meg. Um, I mean, the bloop. That's another one. They keep wanting to attribute the bloop to being something. The bloop is something that people keep trying to say is paranormal or supernatural or a sign of something deep into the ocean. But it's been so debunked as something natural, but people still persist. I love the tree octopus. I have had so many people believe that there are tree octopi in the Pacific Northwest. It's funny. It's like so many people still are just so clueless about parts of the country that you can convince them, especially if you're from there, that something actually exists. It doesn't hurt that there's been some really solid models and sculptures made of the tree octopus that are really convincing. I mean, Wibs, that's a solid possibility. I mean, the squids just keep getting bigger, but I doubt they're cracking big. Drop bears. Drop bears are Australian, though, right? They're the supposed carnivorous koalas. Yeah, the mollusks that live in wood are called slugs. Oh, they are our drop bears. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of easy to convince people of that because the Pacific Northwest is where the Puget Sound specifically in that area is where the largest octopi in the world come from. That's where they're found. They're big. They're huge. So you can convince people of that. Still, though, giant squids are neat, but my favorite squid is the Humboldt squid. The Humboldt squid is a pack hunting squid, and it's terrifying. The wolves of the sea. They're smart, and they're numerous, and they're maneuverable as seals. They're not little floaty, serene little things. They swoop around through the water like sea lions, and they're nuts. Yeah, the Humboldt squids are awesome. Yes, shipworms are also mollusks. That is true. But yes, The Future is Wild. Not only the show, but I remember reading the book that it's based on. Pretty cool stuff. Makos are fast enough to bite people who are skiing water skiing. Doesn't surprise me. We had Makos in the Puget Sound. But yeah, I don't know. I feel there's room for the more mundane cryptids, like the Loveland frog. Not going to be a real thing. The frog wearing trousers and carrying a magic wand that sparks, not a real thing. If you get a chance to watch the Frogman movie, I highly recommend it. It is a solid, like found footage style movie. It does a great job and it does an amazing job of making one of the most absurd cryptids into a credibly spooky creature. They go full Lovecraft with the Loveland frog. It's good. It's a good movie. It's called Frogman. and it's got an amazing poster. The poster evokes the classic Legend of Boggy Creek poster with the figure of the frogman in the foreground. But then it has this really cool treatment of the trees that arc above the frogman, and you have a double moon that shows up between the branches of the tree that forms a frog face. It's a brilliant poster. I want a copy of it for my wall. Yes, the furred trout, the fake animals that they used to create. Furred fish in general were popular across the world, not just the furred trout in Quebec, but when the New World was super mysterious, they had hucksters trying to convince people that there were furred fish out here. Does Long Beach, Washington actually have an alligator man? But let's see, what are some other good ones? I also have a tendency to not believe in UFOs. I mean, not that I don't believe in I do believe in unidentified flying objects, but I don't believe in extraterrestrial visitation. I just don't think we're that interesting. And I also have a really hard time believing that that species that can make it across the vast gap of space with that kind of advanced technology can't keep their shit in the air and keep themselves hidden. Um, yeah, I think for me, UFO mythology and folklore is just a modern scientific iteration of ancient fairy and spirit belief systems because there's a lot of parallels. You know, I did actually, it's funny, I wrote a paper on that when I was in like grade school on how alien abduction and how alien belief and fairy belief paralleled one another. And of course, that's one of those that just ties into another thing. Like what so many of the cryptid things, when there is a scientific or psychological explanation, um, the believer will tend to pull an uno reverso on you and say that those are just proof of the things existing because clearly the ancient people who believed in fairies were actually being visited by aliens, and the fairies were actually the aliens, and the ancient spirits were actually the aliens, uh, and that's why they're similar. Just like people, the previous earlier comment about the overlapping bear habitats, bear sightings, bear encounter maps, and the overlap and how they overlap with the Bigfoot sighting things. That set of maps has been used as proof that Bigfoot is out there because see, this is proof that those habitats can support a large omnivorous animal, and therefore see, Bigfoot is existing in those same spaces because they can support him. Why do they have crocodile heads and eat people's hearts? Well, because they did. Ancient aliens. Oh. Yes, let's throw up a giant middle finger to human accomplishment. actually, Grumpy, one of the best collections of creatures, and I'm happy to see that some of them started to make it into some of the monster manuals because Fifth Edition created a whole bunch of monster manuals. Is the Logger bestiary, the bestiary of the Northern Woodsman that they did. It's so full of stuff, really good stuff. People hearts are yummy. All right. Well, it's 11 o'clock. This has gone on way longer than I had expected, and actually has been a lot more entertaining than I thought it might be. But I appreciate everybody showing up. And the last half of this has become the Eli doesn't believe in anything stream. But what can I say? I've always used the term for myself. I am a open skeptic. I used to consider myself a skeptical believer. Like I used to believe things existed, but before I was going to believe, you had to really prove it to me. These days, I consider myself more of a open-minded skeptic. Like if you were to come up to me, well, I guess I'm just a skeptic because the open-minded part is kind of pointless because if you can provide to me proof that something exists, then I'm not shaking my skepticism. You're just providing proof. The ancient aliens movement is designed to undermine science in general. I would believe you if I didn't think that it was actually started in good faith originally with Chariots of the Gods. And by good faith, I mean not necessarily that Von Daniker believed in what he was writing, but I believe he was writing it not to undermine science, but to just create a product. If by that you mean co-opted, yes. There's also the entire possibility that people's belief, and nowadays there's so much of this that so much of the fringe beliefs are honestly just memes. Like I highly doubt as many people actually believe the world is flat as professed to be. It's probably to a huge chunk of that population. It's just a meme. It's like clowns, like clown fear. Most people who say they're terrified of clowns aren't actually terrified of clowns. It's just funny and cool to say you're terrified of clowns. You know, I mean, there are real people who are terrified of clowns, yes, and there are real people who believe the earth is flat. But I believe that the vast majority of them are taking a piss, as the Brits would put it. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, Chariots of the Gods. He was so. Here's the problem with things like Von Daniken. People believe it, even if it's meant to be fiction. People believe it, and then they get carried away, and then it grows. I know this. I've had firsthand experience with it. My grandmother, while she didn't necessarily believe in Von Daniken's interpretation, she believed that what he proposed there was to some extent at least a very viable possibility. And my grandmother, not a dumb woman, well read, technically savvy for her day, artistic thinker, a conversationalist, you know. So yeah. ASCII. An ASCII novel would be painful to read. But no, I mean the problem, and I guess that's true of any media though. And when you're creating that media, you don't know who's going to latch onto it. I mean, you know, you could write the most absurd thing, and somebody could find that just resonates with them as their truth. And then what do you do? Yeah, except for all of the moon landing fraud arguments are easily disproven. So I recently just heard a conspiracy that nuclear bombs aren't real. I was watching, actually. It was funny because the way I heard it was not from anybody who actually believes it, but it was actually kind of a discussion slash essay on the theory, on this conspiracy that nuclear bombs aren't real. That Hiroshima and Nagasaki were taken up by conventional firebombing. They weren't actually nukes, and that the governments never actually built atomic and nuclear bombs. They just told people they did because that's all they needed to do to stop war, was to create the idea of mutual assured destruction and enough window dressing to make it seem convincing, but it's never been real. That's the conspiracy. And evidently some people believe it. And that's one of those ones that's easy to sucker people in, because it's really easy to believe that the government just took billions of dollars and funneled it into whatever else and didn't build the nukes that they said they built with the. But it starts to fall, like any other conspiracy, it starts to fall apart when you start analyzing the details. And so, yeah, it's, you can write anything. You'll always find somebody to believe it. It's just a matter of to what degree they believe it. Before I go, I mean, are there any particular cryptids or anything like that anybody has? Does anybody have a favorite cryptid? I mean, I haven't heard of all of them. I've heard a good chunk of them, but I mean, I remember back in a day when Bigfoot was basically in the Pacific Northwest, the squonk. I mean, the one that cries itself to death. Loch Ness Monster. Already mentioned that one. That's the one that is probably just wakes and waves, or sea lions and seals swimming in a row. I have never read Shambling to Hiroshima. That's funny. Let's see. I mean, I think Bigfoot will always be my favorite cryptid, just because it's kind of in my DNA, just because I'm from the Pacific Northwest, which for the longest time was Bigfoot Central. Now Bigfoot's everywhere. And, he's not special anymore. I was into Bigfoot before it was cool. I'll go get my beanie right now. But in my skinny jeans. Yeah, and that's the problem with it, Wibbs, is that particular conspiracy is so I can't even think of the word. It's just it's like Holocaust denial. It's it's insulting, it's insensitive, and it's dangerous. It's, there are definitely people who suffered from that. So, yeah, Mar Hockman, there are dozens of layers of lies for World War II, but there are some that are a bit more irrefutable than others. Yes, several genocides occurred. We're aware, and we're not going to go into that. So the Japanese yokai, as much as I like Japan and stuff like that, is not something that I've studied too much. I mean, I know some of the little weirder points, but the problem is that I get hung up on the language, and so it makes it hard for me to process. There's a lot of fiddly bits to uh, to Japanese folklore. I mean, I can't remember what they're called, but I really love the household items that can become animate. Mar Hockman, first of all, people are always going to point out the most well-known one because it's an easy reference point. And every discussion is not necessarily big enough to cover all the details. It can often damage a discussion by trying to be specific and point out every last detail that exists along the same lines. You'll lose people. It's the protest sign approach. Protest signs communicate a basic idea. They are never going to communicate all of the information, nor are they going to communicate the nuance. They can't, and trying to do so would produce a cumbersome and ineffective sign. So a discussion about the genocide in World War II is unlikely to include all of the data because A, it doesn't always have to, and B, trying to discuss it all can be detrimental to the conversation. Well, so you're making an assumption. You're assuming the people you're talking to don't know the nuance. I guarantee you a good chunk of the people, myself included, and in this conversation, know some of that nuance without it having to be explicitly stated. So, so I'll go out on and probably open up a can of worms. The popular protests slogan for defund the police, right? It's a simple statement. It is not a statement that indicates that anybody of any actual thought wants to get rid of the police in their entirety. It is a call to action to reevaluate the current state of policing and come up with strategies, programs, and methods of policing the population that are more effective than they currently are. Yes, some people take it that way. That is true. But that is also not what the people who came up with the slogan meant, and it's not the information behind it. But the slogan is there to invite conversation and to create an idea. Just like the discussion of a Holocaust, a genocide, can open up a further discussion of that genocide in the appropriate context and the right time. The original intent did not get lost in the noise. The problem is that the original intent is often subverted actively by media and by individuals' preconceptions. Because I, the lefty dude in most rooms I seem to be in, can tell you, I don't know a single person who's, well, that's not true. I know one really radical leftist guy, but very few of the people I know want to get rid of the police entirely. Yeah, see, Grumpy, that's the point. Is far too much money is being spent and spent improperly in trying to enforce the law, and it's proving to be increasingly ineffective. There are ways to address those issues at a more root level that are far more effective and have been proven so. And that's what it really gets to. It's another popular one. Seeing as we're here, it's pushing midnight. I guess we're just loonies at this point. The ACAB slogan. Yes, plenty of people are fuck all the cops. Whatever. But there's lots of people who understand that it's not actually every cop. And the ACAB sentiment doesn't necessarily mean that all cops are actually the bad guys. It's bringing up a wider topic. Like, are you one of the good guys if you are a cop who knows that cops are doing bad things, but you're not doing anything about it? That's the wider discussion. It's not the whole discussion, but it's the wider discussion. Sage. Good night, Grumpy. I probably should have cut out at 11 because look where we're at now. I'm going to call it now. You're right, Wibbs. There are neighborhoods where the police don't go anymore, but there are also neighborhoods where the people have managed to do more in those neighborhoods than policing them ever did. So there's a counterpoint there. Good night, all. Thank you for coming on. Sorry that it turned into a bit of a social political ramble. I guess amongst the list of cryptids out there could also be included the truth. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming by.